Everyone has the same 5 core areas of their life that ultimately determine how happy they'll be. Unfortunately, most of us have developed failure habits in each, and it's Will Moore's mission to help replace those with success habits to maximize momentum. After exiting his business for a combined 9-figure sum, Will learned it's not just about becoming an entrepreneur of your career, but an entrepreneur of the most important business you'll ever run, your life. And to crush it in your life requires firing on all cylinders in your 5 cores by continually taking action, building habits, and maintaining balance in each. Hello, and welcome to the 5 Core Life Podcast with Will Moore, founder of More Momentum. If you've not already, please make sure to follow and subscribe to the 5 Core Life Podcast wherever you get your podcasts so that you get notified when episodes air every week. In today's episode of the 5 Core Life, host Will Moore sits down with Ben Saunders, Polar Ben as he's known, 2-time world record holder for longest human-powered polar journey in Antarctica, and a man who's had a Lego made after him. Pretty big deal when you have a Lego made after you. Ben and Will talk about what you do is more important than how you do it. They also explore the importance of taking action without certainty, and that being paramount to growth and success. In addition, they share how setting goals and just taking action immediately versus waiting until everything's perfect is crucial. Plus, Ben shares the top habit that's helped him get to where he is, and he's crossed Antarctica twice. Are you ready to fire on all cylinders? If so, let's go.
So speaking of, let me just kind of reintroduce you briefly for those that are on. Dude, you're an impressive man. I watched some of your video clips. I saw some of your TED Talk getting attacked by a polar bear. If you don't mind, I'd love to share with our viewers kind of that story because it's a really neat one. You hold the world record for longest human-powered polar journey in history.
Yep.
Right, 2,888 kilometers. I'm an American, so what does that mean?
1,800 miles. Well, interestingly, the number on my GPS when we stopped, there were 2 of us on that big expedition. So we walked from the coast of Antarctica to the South Pole, back to the coast again. So the number on the GPS was 1,795 miles, statute miles. So I assumed that's how far we'd walked. I then had an email from someone 6-8 weeks after we got back to the UK. I'm in England right now. It's nearly 5 p.m. here, so it's getting dark. It's feeling wintry. But got back home to the UK. Had this email saying from an expert saying, well, you realise that number is undoubtedly wrong. And I said, what the hell are you talking about? And if you learn nothing else from me today, you will learn this. GPS apparently assumes the Earth is a perfect sphere, which is not. It's kind of squashed a bit at the top and the bottom. So he reckoned we'd walk 6 miles further, which I was pretty happy about. So 1,801 miles.
Well, that's kind of cool because it's like, man, I almost made 1,800.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
So
it's a better.
That wouldn't have made any difference in your record, right?
No, exactly. No. So it was. I think in our bathroom downstairs, like the Guinness World Record is framed on the wall, but I think that says 1,795. So either way, it was a long trip, about 69 marathons back to back.
So just real quick, we don't have to go too into this, but what is the process? Do you get with the Guinness Book of World Records and say, I'm going to go do this, and they get it all ready, and then you do it and they're like, okay? Or is it more like you do it and you're like, oh, hey guys, by the way, I just did this, and then they
I'm trying to remember. I mean, we basically did it, and I think we wrote off and applied, and I think you have to pay if you want it, like you can pay for how to have it like fast tracked. So I think we did that. So we got they sort of FedEx you the certificate a week or 2 later. But I think otherwise, if you've done something crazy, grown the longest fingernails or roller skated around, whatever it is, and you just send off your proof you've done it. And I think it takes a few months normally. So yeah, you can pay to fast track it. But that wasn't really the kind of primary motivation behind this trip. But
of course,
it was fun. It's a cool thing to have now, a cool little memento.
It's just a little cherry on top, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't seem like the type of person that's going to go do something just so you can have something to hang in your bathroom. But it's neat, right? Somebody like me looking you up and people that learn about you. And I'm sure Lego was impressed. That's another neat one. So when did that all happen? So Lego.
Oh gosh, yeah, that was really cool. That was actually when we got back from that big expedition in Antarctica. So that was 2014. We did that. So yeah, we actually moved house last year, and I haven't. In my old office, I had the Lego models like out on my shelf, but they're in a box somewhere. I need to rebuild them. I loved it as a kid, and it was just, yeah, that was one of the coolest things to have, like a, Lego. It's like a little figure with a big orange jacket, hood up, goggles on.
I saw that.
Yeah,
I saw that. I know. Yeah. I wish technology's coming. I wish I could just like hit a button right now and have it pop up on the screen.
Yeah, yeah.
Next, right. It's evolving. It's evolving by the day. Hold on. Let me pin this comment so everybody I forgot knows you are. There you are. Ben Saunders. Is it Saunders or Sanders? How do you pronounce it?
Saunders. Yeah, yeah.
Polar bear Ben. I love it. Okay, so Lego. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine, like, hashtag bucket list, like some sort of figure. It may have not even been on your radar, but that's got to be pretty neat to be like, this is something I played with as a kid, and now I have my own little figure.
It was pretty special. And I mean, in a way, that kind of sums up my entire career. Like, stuff I used to love, as a kid, love reading about, love hearing about, love watching, love learning about. The fact that I've kind of done that, it's weird. Like, in some ways, it still hasn't really sunk in. I was up in Scotland last week, right up in the Highlands, so kind of pretty wild up in the north coast of the UK, and I worked up there as a teenager, and that was in basically a I mean, it's like an outward bound center on steroids. So it used to be. So it was run by a guy called John Ridgway, who's an extraordinary character. He's 82 now, but he was the first person to row across the Atlantic from Boston to Ireland in 1966 in a wooden boat. Two guys in a wooden boat. So
John Ridgway?
Yeah. So Ridgway. He's a fascinating character, and he's quite private. I think, when they did this in the 60s, 1966. So I think he was, for a few years, like, had this, he was a celebrity in the UK, and I think he realized that he just didn't like that. So he kind of moved up to the middle of nowhere in Scotland and created this school. So I worked for him as an instructor for a year in my late teens, and that was where the screw came loose. That's why I first started dreaming about doing this kind of thing. So to go back there, last week, and to think, like, wow, I worked there 25 years ago, and if you told the 18-year-old me then that I'd go on to do 4,500 miles on foot now in the Arctic and Antarctica, and world records, all this stuff, I'm not sure I would have believed you. So yeah, I mean, the Lego, same thing.
Right. I mean, that's neat, man. Well, I love talking to people like you. Right. And obviously you're a goals guy. You don't get to where you are by not having goals. So, right. That's a neat, thank you for that backstory. I actually did Outward Bound years ago in the Colorado Rockies. So, I can imagine when you said Outward Bound on steroids, I mean, at the time I thought it was the most difficult thing a human can ever do. And I'm sure it was even nothing in comparison to what you're describing. The hardest part for me, I remember, was we had this solo period, and we weren't to eat for 3 days. You're on your own, you're in a tent, and it's a fasting period, right? And I'm a guy that, everybody's got their thing. Some people seem to be okay, like, fasting it's very, very difficult for me. And we'd already underpacked going into the solo. So we were literally, going in starving, and it was like, okay, time to fast for 3 days. They gave us a little bag of pork. That's all we had: granola, oats, raisins, peanuts. Yeah, Explorer. I'm sure you're familiar. And that was gone the first day. Of course, I didn't crash. And then it was like there was this little peanut shell, and I'll never forget this image of this ant. Just kind of just laying there, just like, okay, when is this? The hours are going by so slowly. And I look down, this little ant is crawling over my peanut shell, like the skin, the outside of the peanut, right? Not even like the actual shell, that little reddish skin. And he starts to crawl away with it. And I smashed that little guy, and I ate him and the skin.
bit of protein.
That's how hungry. And I look back at that, and I'm like, that's amazing that actually happened. But at the time, it was like not only normal, but I was like, oh my God, what a treat! I got an ant in that shell. Like, it gave the ant a little bit of flavor, with the salt. Anyways, so Outward Bound, if anybody hasn't done it, or if you got kids, I highly recommend it. unbelievable character builder. It completely changed my perspective on the world, on life, and it allowed me to see that anything is possible. And I can 1000% stand behind the fact that I think that it helped contribute to me and where I ended up, because I was like, if I got through that, I can get through anything. It sounds like had a similar experience on you.
Absolutely. And I think even before that, I think even as a kid, like I was one of those kids that didn't respond well to being forced to sit in a classroom, sit still, and remember what you're being told. Like my brain didn't work. I had to be kind of engaging with stuff and preferably outdoors and kind of trying things and experimenting things. And I loved, like, I enjoyed like science experiments and when you get to do stuff. But yeah, like sitting and being told to remember things didn't really work for me. So yeah, the outdoors was where it happened and where I came alive, really. And I think ultimately what taught me about goals and about having a work ethic and you know, kind of making things happen, like figuring out my own sense of agency, like that all happened through the outdoors, ultimately through these expeditions. And it's funny that, yeah, I remember as a teenager like thinking, oh, I don't want to be a businessman. I want to be like an adventurer. And now looking back, like the hardest part of what I've done for the last 20 years has been the commercial side. Of course, I'm a businessman. I've got to raise huge amounts of money to fund these expeditions. And I'm, you know, often, you know, trying to pull a team together, employing people. We have an office, you know, so it's been a business all along. It took me a while to realize that. I sort of become the CEO of this weird company where I was the boss, but I was also like the product. I was the thing we were shipping, you know, so.
That's, yeah, no, I can relate to that in what I'm doing now, because right, I'm kind of, you know, obviously our stories are completely different, but out there trying to help people and become their best selves and be able to say, hey, this is where I want to be, this is what I'm good at. So you found your passion earlier, rather than, you know, what a lot of people do, which is maybe your parents or society or whatever said, you know what, you should be sitting behind a desk, you'll make more money, and then just doing that and just slowly suffering, and I call it hovering between your optimal self and rock bottom your whole life. To me, there's nothing worse, because when you hit your rock bottom, you can at least like be like, okay, something's got to change. Like it's got to go up. What if you're kind of in that middle zone where it's like you're just kind of going through life, and it's like every day kind of blends into the other, and you don't love what you're doing. It's I can't imagine a worse.
Absolutely. And of course, you know, my careers advisor at school never mentioned Polar Explorer as an option. I never knew that could be a career. So, you know, and I think it's interesting. I read a really cool book a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, by Cal Newport. It's called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And you can ultimately boil the whole thing down, his whole argument to that what you choose to do is less important than how you do it. And I think that's really important. Like looking back, I think people often mistakenly assume that my entire life has been like following my dream, and I always knew exactly what I wanted to do, which is not true. Like you know, even in my early 20s, I didn't know this could be a career. I was just pursuing something I enjoyed, and in some ways, there've been enormous, you know, not only challenges along the way, but massive failures as well, and real setbacks. And you know, my first expedition, 2001, I was 23 years old. I came back from that in so much debt, you know, with everyone around me. My stepfather, like, just telling me that he knew it all along, like the most idiotic thing I could have done. And the sooner I, you know, got this out of my system and settled down to a sensible career, the better. So part of me was always like, well, screw you, watch this, and you know, and it was sheer necessity back then. Like the only way I could think of like getting myself out of this hole that I dug myself into was another expedition. Like, if I can raise enough money, I can pay off the debt from first year. So yeah, of my dozen or so big expeditions, the first two were like this Ponzi scheme where I'm like desperately paying off the debt from the first one to do, you know. So it was, yeah, it was, you know, yes, of course, it was passion and pursuing something that I loved and that inspired me, but there was also necessity. Like I had to make it work, and I think that's I think it's important.
That's right. It's amazing when your back's against the wall what human beings are able to do, and I believe all human beings have that in them. You know, there's definitely, you know, that whole saying, the going gets rough, the tough get going. I think some people more so than others kind of kick into a gear. But again, I think that all ties to mindset and kind of like, you know, what your perspective is on life. And I think you can certainly develop into that. And it's just, as I'm sure you can attest, you just take one small action that becomes the next, and then kind of compounds. And then before you know it, you're building that momentum and you're gaining that confidence, and your perspective literally just starts changing. And you're like, I can do whatever the heck I want. Lego just made an action figure. I'm literally a superhero. Well, what?
It's really interesting. I mean, come back to mindset. I think one of the things that I'm fascinated by, and probably the biggest ingredient in the success that I've had in the weird niche that I've specialized in, has come through I guess you call it self-belief. And I don't mean arrogance or ego or like self-importance, but you know, the belief in my own capacity to make things happen. And my theory is that self-belief is a bit like a muscle. Like it's a human quality. We all have it to greater or lesser degrees, but it responds to stimulus. Like you can strengthen it. And I think certainly in my experience, the stimulus that it responds to is not success or failure, but it's the endeavor, it's the trying stuff, it's the taking action without certainty, you know, having courage. And so many people, so many companies I think make the mistake of kind of thinking, well, we should wait until we're confident before we take the first step. And it's a cliche, but you know, confidence only ever follows courage. Like you can't learn to swim by reading a book about swimming. Like at some point you have to get in the water, and that holds true for pretty much any endeavor in life, I think.
100% agree with that. It's amazing how much this particular topic comes up with when I'm interviewing, you know, successful people, happy people, you know, people that have kind of seemed to figure it out. You know, and it ties to, you know, there's a couple of books. One of them is called Getting Real. I think the first one it stems from was, I'm trying to remember, I'm looking at my books right here. I'm drawing a blank on the actual name, but it stems from the concept of basically just taking action and pivoting. Don't try it like as a business even. Like, and this is the same. I always say, you know, run your life like an entrepreneur. Like an entrepreneur does certain things and they take chances and they say, okay, this is where I want to be. This is my goal. Like you need to run your life the same way. And if you wait for everything to be perfect, you know,
you'll be waiting forever. Yeah.
Well, not only that, and then it's like you may have missed the opportunity, and or you think you've got it all figured out, and you spend all this time, and then you actually, you know, in the business world, the example is you launch a product and then the customers go, oh no, this isn't what we wanted. And it's like, now you have to start all over? No. So you just small steps at a time. You, like you said, you take a little bit of a leap of faith, and then that's how you really, and then when you have a little bit of success, that's when you really, your mindset, your confidence, your perception, they start to improve. And then, you know, and then if you fail and you're able to sort of say, okay, this isn't the end of the world. This is just, I just learned what not to do here, and I'm going to pivot over this way. And then you're literally just gaining that momentum and improving the process. And it's amazing how simple of a concept that is, but how few people seem to grasp that and utilize it.
Exactly. I was going to say something else that I've lost my thread, but yeah, but about I mean, I say now, like, to me, I think one of the things that really continues to excite me is trying to, I guess, encourage, inspire people to be more adventurous. And I don't mean like to go bungee jumping or to buy some skis and a tent and a sledge and go to the North or South Poles, but to try stuff, like, you know, experiment with things. Yeah, and I think so many of us kind of go through life thinking, well, I need to know a bit more. I need to learn a bit more before I can start the business or go on the journey or do the thing. And so often, like, the best way to learn is to do the thing. You know, that's kind of how it works. So
do the thing, and you shall have power. Right? That's a quote. I can't remember where that's from. The Lean Startup, by the way, came to me. That was the book.
Brilliant. Write it down.
Have you read that one?
I haven't. I've heard of it, so I'm writing it down right now.
It's right up your alley, and it talks about exactly kind of that philosophy of just do it. Just do it, and then pivot and tweak along the way. And it's the law of compounding. I call it my equation of life, something that it's taken me years and years to develop, is your belief system plus your repeated actions plus time equals who you will become, right? So it's like, if your belief system is no bueno and you don't believe in yourself, that's going to affect your actions, and then time's going to do its thing, and it's going to take its toll, and that's the person you'll become. But if you start to upgrade, your mindset, what you think you're capable of, your confidence, your perception, your outlook, and you start to take an action and you have a little bit of confidence, and then you build that more and more on top of it. And then all of a sudden, the habits is a big thing, what I talk about. I don't know, I'd love to hear your take on habits, but to me, habits and routine, it's everything, right? It's like, habits don't care if they're good or bad, helping or hurting us. They're going to do their thing no matter what. And if you can develop the habits that are pushing you in the direction you want to head into, and then they become automatic, your brain's like, all right, we got that one. We don't have to worry about it. And you're just doing it. And there's so many, it works the opposite way too, where we're taking the habits, where we've developed habits that are hurting us. And so I have obviously these 5 core areas, and it's about, building them in each. And it sounds like you're somebody I would call firing on all cylinders.
try to be. I mean, it's been interesting over the years. When I think back to, for me, the biggest expedition was 2013, 2014. So that there were 2 of us on this. This was the 1,800 mile, nearly 4 months in Antarctica. And I actually, when I think back to my life then, like it was kind of off balance. Like I'd had this absolute tunnel vision focus on a goal that took everything I had, like all of my energy, all my time, all the money I could raise, and like other stuff, relationships were disastrous at that point. So it's taken me. It's funny I remember being like 17, 18, I was up in Scotland thinking, by the time I'm like 26, I'm going to have it all. I'll have it all figured out. I'm 43 now, and I finally feel like, okay, I'm kind of figuring this out, like self-awareness, self-knowledge. And it's interesting. Someone I did an interview last week. Someone asked me my proudest achievement, and I think they were going to say like walking to the South Pole and back. And I was like, genuinely, it's being happy, being content. Like I feel happier now than I have like my entire life to date. And I'm still, I'm still ambitious. I'm still driven. But I think you're coming back to goals. A big lesson for me on that massive expedition in Antarctica, because that was the biggest goal I'd ever set myself. That was aiming as high as I could in my field. And we did it. We pulled it off, and there was a definite finish line at the end, and everything for a decade before that had been geared to reaching that finish line. And looking back, I think I'd made the mistake of viewing success as a finish line, as a threshold. like if I work hard enough, if I accumulate enough, achieve enough, I'm going to get there. I'll cross the line, and my life's going to be awesome.
And then I'll just sit on a beach and drink.
Yeah, and it didn't really happen. And actually, in a strange way, it was almost what I imagined was going to be like opening the door to the best period of my life. Like, phew, I made it. I've done it. I've got to the top of my game. Actually, I entered like there was a really low point. Of course, physically we were exhausted. I'd lost 50 pounds, body weight in 3.5 months. Came back like completely shattered. But also like my goal, the thing that had been this vision, this mission that had been giving me all of this energy, motivation for years. Once we achieved it, gone, and there wasn't anything there to replace it at the time. So I think I'd if you'd asked me to define success back then, it would be achieving a goal. Right now, I look at success differently. I think it's I look at it now as like continuing to strive well and continue to evolve as a human being and to learn and to grow. Like it's another cliche, but like I see success now as the journey, not as the destination.
I mean, you just hit on something that I'm so glad you said that. I talk all the time. This is exactly my philosophy, and I use the example for me of selling my company last year. Yours was achieving this expedition. 10 years, similar time frame. That's all I worked for, right?
Yeah.
And it was amazing, and it was the actual journey, like you said. It was the chase of it. And sometimes it doesn't feel like that. And there's going to be, like said, the ups, the downs. But it's how you take those failures and like, okay, that sucked. Like nobody's going to be like, woohoo, I failed. That's awesome. Right. That's part of life. And without the bitter, the sweet ain't as sweet. So you're going to fail. But if you're able to pivot and you keep growing, you're like, okay. And you keep working. That's ironically what real happiness is. You got to have a destination and a goal. It's not the destination itself. And so I tell the story about how when I sold my company, it felt good. I say for 10 minutes, I always say, but really it was more like I took about a month off when we finally achieved, we exited and I played golf. I did these things that I just hadn't allowed myself to do for quite a while because I was just like locked into this business and concentrate on getting this thing sold at the end. And, first it was building it up, then it was getting it sold. But then it was like, now what? And it was almost like a depression set in. And I was like, oh man, and it's just crazy to me. You and I are not the only, but luckily in the back of my mind, I kind of knew this because I've always been this insatiable self-help piece reading, and I kind of knew what was coming, but it was neat to actually experience it myself.
For sure. Yeah. Same thing for me. I was aware that this happened, and you read about it, hear about it a lot. There was a lovely, I forget which year, I should know which year, but a British professional cyclist, Bradley Wiggins, he was the first Brit to win the Tour de France. And I heard him interviewed a few years ago, and he kind of came back from France, and had achieved his wildest dream. And he talked about like getting home, and his wife, I think, had gone shopping, and there was like a post-it note on the fridge, like, put your laundry in the machine. He was like, oh, like this isn't what I expected this was going to feel like, So right. I kind of like academically, I sort of understood that was likely to happen, but still going through it was tough. But I'm also glad I did.
So listen up and listen good, people. All those people chasing something, thinking first of all, it's good to have a goal, and we're certainly not telling you not to, right? You wouldn't take that back to the world, I'm sure.
Vitally important, I think, having goals plural, absolutely. Yeah, I think humans are like, that's how we're wired. We're kind of goal-oriented, goal-pursuing beings.
That's exactly right. It's in our DNA. So that's a universal principle that you can't cheat the system. You can't get around it. And it's amazing how society is kind of, it sets up this illusion, with, if I could just get this amount of money, right, then I could just be happy. And I can sit on the beach. And
we were just talking about the new iPhone.
Right.
Case in point.
That's exactly right. And right, the material, the concentration on wealth, a study came out recently that I read. I don't remember the exact details, but to no surprise, we're becoming more and more focused on that, right? Like that's becoming what the majority of people's focus is, like tremendously so. Whereas even in like the 70s, 80s, it was like, it was relationships and it was, these other cores. But when it's all, I have 5 cores, career and finances is one of them. And that is important. But again, it's what are you doing for your career and finances? Are you actually waking up doing something that you enjoy and love, and you're working towards a goal that's soul filling? And then, you're making a living doing that versus just getting up and going through the motions like a zombie. That, to me, that's not a career. But anyways, going back, like what you were saying earlier, it comes down to these universal principles of sort of like figuring out as you're going through life, and like you said, you're 43, I'm 44. And it just really has hit me. It just, even in the last couple of years, as I'm kind of putting all this stuff together. So when I quit my job, or when we sold our business, I switched to what I'm doing now. And I've been working on this book since I was in college, and been taking down this crazy note taker. And that's what fills my soul, is just like figuring out like, okay, I read it here. I've read it here like 4 different ways. Like, is this a universal principle? Like, is this really like apply to everything? Because there's so much out there, and you never know, especially now, what to believe, what to trust, with so many things coming at us. And so I'm like, I just want to get them all. I want to get them all down. And I want to test them on myself. And so I can't say I've tested all of them, but most of the ones I talk about and that are going to be in my book and the app that I'm developing, it's like, you can hang your hat on these guys. Like, these have proven themselves throughout time. They're going to prove themselves till the end. And, one of them is this: happiness is figuring out what it is that you enjoy, that you're passionate about, that you're good at, taking action on those things, setting goals, and continuing to move. There's this app that speaking of iPhone, that I saw years ago that was really interesting. It's no longer in the App Store. It was called The Meaning of Life. I don't even remember who turned me on to it, but literally you clicked on it, and I have a picture of it here of my vision board. And at the top, it says, we strive for more. It was just one simple graphic. It said, we strive for more. And then there's a half circle with an arrow pointing to because we feel dissatisfied. And then there's another half circle pointing up to we strive for more. And like at first when I didn't quite understand it. And then it kind of hit me like we're never, like you just said, it's in our DNA. We're never going to really fully feel satisfied, right? We're going to hit that goal and we're not just going to be like, okay, cool. Now I can. And at first it kind of depressed me. I'm like, geez, like, so I'm never going to be able to stop and just chill. Like I've got to, but then once I kind of got it and realized that no, all that means is the key to life is movement and momentum and continuing to do that. And as long as you do that, no matter what you're doing and you're heading in the direction that you want to, you're going to be happy. Right. And so like I took that screenshot, I have it here, I look at it all the time, and it just reminds me like, and then there's the whole like more, people want more. It's like, yeah, that's the saddest thing is when people say, okay, I want to get to this dollar amount. And then what you and I just talked about, they discover that, oh wait, there's a hollow. There's no
end to that game. You know, I was very, very lucky. This was probably 5-6 years ago. Invited to join a friend of mine whose dad has a yacht, like a motor yacht in the Mediterranean, and I kind of joined them for, I guess it was 10 days on this, but I'd never done that. But it was insane, like glimpse into a whole different world. There's like the crew on the boat. It's mad. And we came the last day. We came back into Palma Harbor in Mallorca, and this was I guess the boat we're on was about 100 foot. It's a Ferretti, like Italian, you know, beautiful boat. And we came back into Palma Harbor, and there are some like massive super yachts like in the harbor, and the guy that owned the boat I was on, I remember seeing him standing on the bridge of his boat, like looking at these bigger boats, looking really like crestfallen, like like I haven't done enough, I haven't got there, you know. Just, and that game never ends. Like if that's how if that's the metric you use to assess, to, you know, your own self-worth, then that you can never get to the end of that game. You're never going to be satisfied. So I think it's a good thing to learn. And it's still, having said that, I'm not, you know, clearly I'm not a Buddhist monk who meditates all day. I'm a guy who likes cool things, cars and watches and, you know, fun stuff. But I think kind of learning to see them for what they are, and realizing that if that's how you measure your own self-worth, then you're never going to get to the end of that.
That's exactly right. And I like how you put that, because it's okay to get the new iPhone if you can afford it. And it's like, you know, to have certain goals. And that's, again, that kind of ties into what we're saying, like certain goals. But what you need to be careful about is not getting caught up in the just more.
Absolutely.
And then being like, well, now I've hit this, I got that. Now, oh, but this guy has the newer version. I need to get that. It's funny. Tim Ferriss, are you familiar with him?
Very much so. Yeah. Yep.
So he's got a great podcast. I don't know if you've ever listened to it. And I'll never forget, he had a billionaire. I don't remember the guy's name, but he had a billionaire on there that he was interviewing. And the guy goes, I caught myself last week. He said, so he has his own jet. And he said, I read this article about this other billionaire that just got the newer version of my jet. And he's like, I got all upset for a second. And luckily this guy had evolved enough in his brain to catch it. But it's that instinct started to kick in. A lot of people don't have that awareness to catch themselves, but he caught himself. He's like, oh my God. He's like, am I really complaining about the fact that somebody's got a better jet than me? When like, that's like, you know, anybody, like 99.9% of people on the planet would be like, oh my God, that's the most amazing goal that I'll probably never reach. And so that's a perfect case in point of, you know, we want more, but it's like, okay, what is enough, and how do you measure your happiness and success? And that's
I think for me, one of the really interesting things these big expeditions have given me over the years has been time, like completely away from civilization and society and everything that comes with that. So nowadays, like no, Antarctica 2013-14, we were down there, two of us, for nearly 4 months, and we had no access to the news, to current affairs, to gossip, to social media, to any kind of media. So we had 4 months with being, exposed to zero advertising, zero marketing, zero social media, zero comparison to other human beings. It was just two of us down there, and we didn't, I didn't miss stuff. I didn't spend my days thinking, my life would be better if I had the newest iPhone, or like maybe need a bigger TV, or maybe and it's very easy to kind of fall back into that in the real world when we're kind of surrounded by, bombarded with images of people that have better than us. They've got a, they're fitter than us, they're richer than us, they've got a better car, they've got a better house, better, and that kind of comparison is just, I think, can be really, really damaging sometimes. But having said that, it can also be inspiring, like, for sure. My dad was a bricklayer, he was a manual laborer, he was an orphan, so he grew up in a home, no family beyond that, so I have no idea where I come from, originally, and he was dirt poor, absolutely nothing. So as a kid, and I think growing up, I see things and think, well, I want that, I'm going after that. So it's a kind of double-edged sword, but I think it's, especially nowadays, especially in the kind of Instagram, and here we are talking on Instagram, but it's so easy to what was somebody said recently, to compare your inside to someone else's outside. And I think what you have to remember is that social media is a highly curated, often manipulated, presentation of someone's life, or what they want their life to look like. Very rarely is it reality. So I think it's important to be mindful of that when you compare yourself to other people, or what they have.
That's 100% right. And that's what I like. What we're doing here, to me, it's using the platform. Like, there's no manipulation here. This is a live interview, and anybody that's watching it, and then we're going to cut clips out. There's no this isn't what you actually said. This wasn't an actual conversation. And hopefully, the idea is people are helping to gain their momentum and becoming happier and their better selves because of watching this stuff. But you're absolutely right. There's the flip side as well. Teen suicide is, especially for girls, it's at an all-time high, and it's gone. If you look at the numbers since 2008, right around when the iPhone came out, it's gone up every single year. And, social media, and then 2011, 2012 actually is when social media, like Facebook, and that's the MySpace way back in the day was the first one, but started becoming more prevalent. And that's exactly what these people do, right? They're airbrushing, they're showing their most ideal life, and that's not reality. But then, and they build these things. Like, right, don't get me started. This is a whole other conversation. But have you seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix?
Not yet. No, but I've had a couple of friends will be like, you must watch it. So it's on the list. Yeah, maybe
you got to watch it. I won't. I talked about it on another episode. I won't go too into it. But the gist is that, they're not even apologetic about it. And by the way, I don't look at these people as evil. Like, I don't think Mark Zuckerberg, I don't think the founders of Google started out to be evil, but they're trapped. The genie's out of the bottle. They're public to develop certain features to make us more addicted to want to come back, regardless of whether it's content that's helping us or hurting us, if it's helping our well-being, hurting our well-being. And The Social Dilemma does a brilliant idea of kind of showing that path and how that can quickly escalate and lead to you, becoming your worst self and going down a rabbit hole, because it's going to show you more of the, the example was they had this actor and he had broke up with his girlfriend, and then this right-wing conspiracy thing came up, and he was like, what's that? I'm kind of in a bad mood, whatever, I'm in a dark hole. And then because he clicked on it, then he started seeing more of these images. Then he started seeing gun ads. Then he gets himself a gun. And it's like, before you know it, this whole thing snowballed. And it's literally the social media just completely manipulated him into being the person he wasn't. So
there was I can't remember the guy's name. There was another, this was a Tim Ferriss interview from years ago, but a guy who was at Facebook. He was one of the sort of, I think, early kind of lead engineers. And he left really kind of on moral grounds. He said they were obviously engineering for engagement. The more time people spend on the site, the better for them in terms of advertising. The more people engage with the site and like stuff and comment stuff. And he said they basically realized very quickly that the most profitable reaction they could engender in the people using Facebook was outrage. Like, that was what really got people, get them angry, get them wound up. So he said he left because he realized they were engineering for outrage, to make people angry, and upset and anxious. And so I think and again, I'm not saying I don't use I'm not really on Facebook, but Instagram, I mean, owned by Facebook. I use WhatsApp, I use Twitter, so I'm not saying I don't use these things, but I think using them kind of with a bit of awareness and using them
with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As the great Stan Lee, late Stan Lee once said, I loved him. I was a big comic book nerd when I was a kid. And to me, that just says it all. It's like, it's not the technology itself that's bad, right? It's how you're going to use it. And I do think a reckoning's coming in terms of, I think there's going to be a point where these companies are going to sort of have to start taking into account the human wellness aspect. And that has to be part of their business model.
For sure.
I know a lot of people would disagree with me and say that's government trying to come in and control things. But it's like, look what's happening now. Nobody can argue right now that up this last 4 years, we've been heading in the right direction as a planet coming together, working together as one. If anything, it's become more polarized and there's been more of this, right? And so it's like, and if social media is contributing to that, and it's all still new and stuff, like there should be an accountability metric there.
Yeah, for sure.
And so in this social dilemma, one of the examples, this guy worked for Google, and it was cool because it was all these like really high level people that worked for these big tech companies. It wasn't like, the intern that got the coffee. It was like, I was the president of, blah, blah, blah. And so these guys, and one of the guys said, I wrote this memo one day. He's like, I had to, from my soul. And he's like, I wrote this memo about how we got to start factoring in wellness into what we're doing and like not taking advantage of people and whatnot, because, Google is, their whole model is, and same with Facebook, their monetary model is collect as much data on people as they can and then sell it to advertisers. Right. And so by doing that, it can end up going in a bad direction, and then you're spying on people, and then you're encouraging them to take certain actions. Maybe it's not the best for them or whatever. And he said he sent it through to the company and it caught fire. And like everybody was like, yes, good for you for standing up and saying this. And even Larry Page, one of the founders, like got wind of it, and he actually called him into his office. He's like, I just want to thank you for sending this. He's like, this is something that is absolutely needed. And then he said the next day, it was almost like he never wrote it. He said nobody ever did anything, nobody ever took any action, and it was gone.
What's the line? If you're not paying for a service, remember you're not the customer, you're the product.
You're the product. And they say that in the Netflix documentary, they actually use the word user. You're the user, and they said there's only two spaces where the product is considered the user, and it's in drugs and alcohol and addiction and social media. They're like,
social media,
see the correlation there? So very interesting. So we're running out of time. I really would love to get this polar bear story. Do you mind giving us a little?
No, I'll give it try and give you a brief version. So this was my first ever big expedition. It was 2001. I was 23 years old. So looking back, like pretty young. And I was traveling with a guy called Penn Haddo, Penn with a P, Penn was his nickname, but we were Penn and Ben. And we were trying to go from the north coast of Russia. There's like a string of islands off the north coast of Siberia, on foot to the North Pole, which is about 600 miles distance between start to finish. And we didn't get there. We got like 2/3 of the way there. The conditions were horrendous. We ran out of time. You have a limited window because you're walking over the sea. You're walking over the frozen surface of the sea, and it all starts to melt every summer. So we were kind of racing against time. So and this was day 2. So we just started skiing. We'd taken the tent down, packed the sledges. You're wearing a harness, dragging sledges, and Penn was in front navigating, and I was following his tracks. And I had this weird feeling that something wasn't quite right. Like if I left it in my my zips all done up, if I'd forgotten something back at the campsite, like something felt wrong. And I finally stopped and like put my ski poles in the snow, turned, because you have a jacket. You're like Kenny from South Park, so it's like jacket with goggles, everything, so you can't see much. So I like turned around, looked back along our tracks, and saw this polar bear, following us. So I turned around, yelled at Penn into the wind. Luckily, he heard me, and our our bear drill swang into action. Now we had practiced what to do once in the parking lot of, I think in the UK called a Little Chef, which is, I don't know, like a not quite Taco Bell, but that kind of thing, you know, kind of roadside, you know, cafe thing in the UK. And we used like Penn's car as the bear. And yeah, the theory is polar bears are the largest land-based carnivore on the planet. Like the heaviest recorded male adult polar bear was just over a ton. So they're big creatures. I don't know who weighs polar bears for a living, but someone has an even more ridiculous career than mine. And they can do 30 miles per hour. They can sprint. And we're wearing harnesses, dragging sledges, we could do 1.5 miles per hour. So we knew we couldn't outrun the bear. So you have to stand your ground and try and convince the polar bear that you are bigger and scarier than it is, which is not easy. And I'm nowhere near as tall as you. I'm like 5'9" on a good day. So basically, you try and look big. So bears apparently don't have very good eyesight. They have very strong sense of smell. It's how they track their prey, but they can't see very well. So yeah, like skis up in the air, trying to make yourself look big. And Penn was in charge of the gun. Now we'd traveled out from the UK to Russia, so we couldn't take firearms with us. It was impossible. So we had to get something out there, essentially on the black market. So we had this like 12 gauge shotgun, like an antique Russian shotgun, like double barreled. And so Penn was in charge of that. He was like loading the gun, 2 cartridges, closed it, pulled the triggers. There were 2 triggers, one for each barrel, and like click, click, nothing happened. Anyway, this kind of carried on until he got to like the 5th and 6th cartridge. Pulled the first trigger, click, nothing happened. Lowered the gun, walked around his sledge like towards the bear, and everything went into slow motion. I remember, I still have my skis now. I remember thinking like, whoa, Penn has lost it. Obviously, he's going to get eaten. What the hell am I going to do? And everything, like time stood still, and like the bear stopped and Penn stopped, and then bang, the gun went off, like almost like as if it was an accident. And I think it surprised Penn and me more than it surprised the bear, which didn't run off. It just kind of looked up, looked down, and then kind of turned around and sort of walked slowly around us, and then disappeared. But it was only after the bear turned around that suddenly the like adrenaline. Penn was like, "Quick, film it!" And we had like 2001. That's when you used to film things with a video camera that had a little tape in it. Like the whole thing needed to be warmed up, and it was in my sledge. I couldn't even undo the zip. I'd nervous wreck. Right. So it was, yeah, that was a nerve-wracking experience, and it probably should have put me off really, but it was all part of that. Like in a way, that first trip, pretty much everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. So it was a good apprenticeship. And I've never seen another bear that close up ever since. But it was an interesting experience, and I think one of the things I took from that was after that trip was like, you know what, I don't like confrontation at all. I tend to kind of shy away from that. I'm not naturally an aggressive person in that sense. I'm driven. I push myself really hard, but I don't get into fights. But I remember thinking, you know what, I'm never going to be intimidated by a human being ever again. Like we squared up to a tons worth of polar bear.
Right. I mean, that's just, it ties into what we were saying earlier in terms of like when I got out of Outward Bound, I was like, I'm like Superman, I can do anything. And when you finish this journey, including this polar bear experience, you probably felt invincible as well. And right, it's like your mind, that's exactly kind of what I'm about and what I try to help people do. It's like you want to trick your mind, connecting with your mind's why. I'm sure you're familiar with Simon Sinek. I like how he puts it. It's sort of like if you want to change your perception, like you've got to have a reason. Kind of like you can't just be like, I'm going to use my willpower and change my mind into not being intimidated by people. But something like having a polar bear and being like, I survived a polar bear, dude, you're nothing. You don't scare me.
Yeah. I've got a, you probably, I would turn my phone on, but you can't see it because it's like dark in here, but I have a picture framed on my desk, which is from 2004. So that was when I skied solo to the North Pole. So I was 26. And the photo was taken by a friend of mine, a guy called Martin Hartley, extraordinary photographer. And it was taken out of the window of the helicopter that I was in with him. We had 2 helicopters flying out to the start point of this trip. And so the picture is the first helicopter landing on the ice, and I kind of have that there as a like reminder to myself. It's right above my big monitor, my computer, and as it like whatever I'm finding hard right now, if the 26-year-old me could figure out how to rent 2 helicopters in Siberia and like get dropped off on the edge of the Arctic Ocean and survive for 10 weeks on my own. I came home via Canada via a ski plane that picked me off the Arctic Ocean, the other side of the planet. Like if I can figure that out, whatever it is I'm finding hard now, I can figure it out too. Like it's, just got to find a way. So
I love that. I love
that. I've had a couple of hilarious comments from a guy called Tony Hale, who's a great friend of mine, and he had the hard part on that solo trip 2004. He was kind of managing it in the background. He was like keeping everything on the rails. So I just dragged the sledge, did the easy bit. But I've seen a few amusing comments from him. He said, "Don't forget your gloves," which I did. I had to take his. He was on the helicopter, so
there he is. So can you show us? Are you able to? Can we see the?
I don't know if the lighting is. Hang on. What I probably can do. Hang on a second. That's the. Can you see that? What I can do is turn that light around.
Yeah, I see it. Well, the iPhone, man, it's like we were talking about earlier. They
hang on.
For light, so I can see it.
Yeah, there we go. I'm tilting it the wrong way, but that's the helicopter landing on the ice.
Man.
So yeah.
Something most people will never see in their lives, right? And
yeah, it's a special trip.
Talk about a momentum builder, right? I have my morning mantra that I say every morning to kind of give me that boost of energy and confidence and whatnot every day, and that seems like a perfect thing. Just look at that and go, I did that.
Yeah.
But what is today?
I read, where did I see this? A while ago. It was a journalist went to go and interview Kanye West, and was apparently astonished to see in his living room a giant, like, floor to ceiling portrait of Kanye West in Kanye's own living room. And he's like, well, how come you've got a massive picture of you on the wall? And he said, I can't remember exact words. It's something like I've got to cheer for me before anyone else is going to cheer for me. And I think like there's this fine line between kind of believing in yourself and being arrogant. But it's I think it's important to to kind of track your progress and also to kind of have these reminders of things you've managed to do over the course of your life, and to like not be afraid to look back on those and use them as inspiration for whatever you're finding hard now.
I like that. What a great positive spin on what most people would be like, what an arrogant, but that he's right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a picture of me, but it is a picture of the helicopter that I figured out how to charter at the start of the journey. I did. So it's a slightly more modest version.
To me, that's right. That's probably a little bit of a better way to do it. And who knows? Maybe he's just saying that as this is a good story, so that say that I can look at myself every day. But no, I mean, he's say what you want about Kanye West, but he's obviously somebody that in a different field, kind of similar to you, similar to me. He sort of bared down. He said, "This is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it," and he got there. And so that's what helped him to do it. I look at his big smiley mug every day. Good for him. So this has been amazing, man. I like to end each of these. Thank you again so much for coming on.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
First of all, is there any place you want people to be able to check you out or to website, anything we can reverse?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're on Instagram, so I'm Polar Ben on Instagram, and my website is my name, it's bensaunders.com. So yeah, keep an eye on that. I did something this summer, but I might actually pivot. A big part of how I've made a living out of what I do is through speaking and public speaking at big events, and obviously that hasn't happened this year. So I was like, okay, there needs to be a pivot here, and I'm doing lots on Zoom and every other platform at the moment, virtually. But kind of early in the summer when it was quiet, I was like, okay, I need to do something else here. I've got all this time suddenly. I'm not traveling every week. What am I going to do? And a friend of mine was like, well, he's like, look at Tim Ferriss, look at Wim Hof, look at these guys who've Jocko Willink, who've packaged their thing and done it, kind of sold it online. He's like, he said, Ben, when I think of you, I think of tenacity and perseverance and grit. He said, you're the king of grit. You should call it the Grit Academy. So I did that. So the website is learngrit.com.
What is it called?
And learngrit.com.
Learngrit.com.
And yeah, so I've been doing over this year, I've done about a dozen now, it's 90 minutes on Zoom. Basically me talking about what I kind of touched on earlier, this idea that self-belief is a quality that is vital in success and that you can make it stronger. and here are my thoughts on how you do it. So I've really enjoyed doing that, and what I'm thinking of doing now is actually kind of pre-recording it and making a slightly more formal, curriculum and producing support materials and maybe using Udemy or something like that to host it online. Partly as I'm getting busier now and can't do these things like every week or every other week, what I was doing. So yeah, but there'll be more on the website. So either bensaunders.com or learngrit.com.
Love that. Grit. What a great word. I love the word grit. It's not someone, it's kind of an old school word, but it sums it all up. Like
absolutely. Yeah.
Grit. It's in my mantra, actually. I use it. Grit, determination, and persistence are 3 words that I remind myself of every day.
And they're vital in any pursuit, any goal. It's going to take those things.
That's right. And so we'll end on, what is one habit that you think that you, by developing this habit, helped you to become the person that you are today? Kind of a loaded question, but
yeah. Gosh, I would say, and I think this ties into something else. You one of your list of 5, which is physical fitness and kind of physical training. And I think people sometimes think, oh, well, he must have been like all-star athlete at school and kind of natural, that must spring out of bed at 5 a.m. and go for a run without even thinking. And I like most human beings, I have to find ways to motivate myself, and I was not a talented athlete at school by any stretch of the imagination. I didn't really get into team sports at school. I was, and part of that was we moved around a lot. I went to a few different schools, so I was always like the kid who turned up, who didn't know everyone else, and was like the last one to be picked for the football team or whatever it was. So I like kind of relatively late, I guess, in my teens, probably 14, 15, got into running and got into cycling, and they were, those kind of endurance sports taught me what I didn't learn at school about work and about achieving results. And fitness is really interesting because it's like it's a slide. Like you're every day you're either slightly more fit or slightly less fit. Like you can't just get it and keep it forever, and you can't buy it. Like the only way you can get it is through work, and hard work. It's difficult, it's painful, it's uncomfortable. So I think that, and ever since then, ever since I was 14, 15, like first started doing stuff, I got some ridiculous book like that had like calisthenics and star jumps and push-ups, and I was just as a kid was just and I still I get so much even now out of physical training and exercise, and I think it just teaches you so much about discipline, about habits, about the ability to motivate yourself when you don't feel like doing something. And the importance, because if you don't keep doing it, you're going to lose it. So I think, finding some form of challenging physical exercise that you will keep on doing. For me right now, it's running and lifting weights. They're the 2 big things that I do consistently, week in, week out, without fail. So
yeah, I love that. Thank you. Yeah, that's and that ties back to your mindset of like, right, if you set a goal and you're able to keep moving in the right direction, and you keep your body moving, and you hold yourself accountable, and you're developing that discipline, you can't help but, your mindset can't help but improve, because you're like, oh yeah, absolutely. It just builds your confidence and your ability to say, I can accomplish this stuff, right? And versus the opposite, stagnancy. It's no matter whether it's your mind or your body, it's the worst thing you can have, right? If you ain't growing, you're dying. So it's just one more of those things to make sure that you're growing.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, this has been awesome, bro. Thank you.
Real pleasure. Thank you. Well, no, loved it. Really fun conversation.
Really fun. Are there any upcoming expeditions or anything that you're
Yeah, obviously pretty weird year for travel, full stop. So yeah, nothing in terms of like breaking records, actually nothing on the horizon. I want to run, I've got the goal of breaking my like lifetime marathon personal best next spring. So I have a place in the Paris Marathon, but that may or may not happen, who knows. So whatever way, I'm going to figure a way to do that. So I set my best time 14 years ago. So it's good, an interesting challenge. So at the moment I've got my running mojo back, and training hard, motivated. And then beyond that, I've got a project. This is January 2022, so a little way off. But taking a group of students to Antarctica. And the whole thing is around storytelling. And somebody, I was on a conference call last year, and it was with production company look at doing something in Antarctica. I was advising them, and one of the producers on the call had such a brilliant line that I'd stole it and I've been plagiarizing it ever since. And she said, humans are narrative beings. We're not inspired by data, we're inspired by stories. And I was like, that's it. Like, there's all this data coming out of Antarctica, all this climate science. Nobody's really doing anything differently, because it's so hard for people that are never going to visit the place to really understand it. And even I've been to Antarctica 7 times. I still struggle to comprehend the scale of this place and the scale of what's happening. So Antarctica has 255 million gigatons of ice. So what the hell does that mean? Well, okay, for every human being alive on the planet right now, how much ice is that? How much ice do we each have in Antarctica? 3 million tons each. For every human being, 3 million. So the scale of this place is completely mind-blowing. So the data is just incomprehensible. So right. it's stories that matter. So and I think, like, young people learn best from other young people, especially right now. You've only got to look at the news or look at politics to realize why young people are cynical and skeptical about what grown-ups are saying. So the idea is to take a small group of students down there and to really kind of empower them as storytellers, through film, through photography, through art, through writing. Tell the story of this place through their eyes. So that's the next adventure that's inspiring me. So it's not about for me, it's not about personal achievement. It's not about breaking records. I've scratched that itch. So this is about the bigger picture. So yeah, that's what's inspiring me now.
I love that. And that's just so true. It's like, you can say I hiked 1,800 miles across, and it's just a number to people. Like, what's the difference between 1,800 and 24? Like, but most people wouldn't. And then it's like, but if you can use a story to kind of compare, like you just did with the ice and the humans, that's exactly, you're a very smart man. That's what all the success, you look at a guy like Tim Ferriss, you read his book, James Clear's a recent, I don't know if you've read Atomic Habits.
Yes. Yeah, brilliant.
And it's the storytelling and relating it to actual real things versus just stating data and facts that is the key.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. And this has been amazing, and hopefully we'll stay in touch. And your future endeavors, we're friends now. I'll keep following you on social media, using it for good versus evil. Absolutely.
Fantastic. And where are you in the US? Obviously, I'm assuming you're US right now. Whereabouts?
I'm in Chicago.
Fantastic. One of my favorite places. It's just a really, really cool city. I've been, up until 2020, where I haven't traveled anywhere, but I've spent a lot of time in the US. And one of the theories is that my dad might have been, his dad, my grandfather might have been a US pilot that was shot down in World War II and never made it home. So I often wonder if I've got Yankee blood in me somewhere. But Chicago is great. It's kind of, to me, it's almost like New York, with the intensity like dialed down a little bit. It's a great city.
I'd agree with that. Right. It's an interesting time right now with COVID, and I actually live in a suburb. I've got a wife, 2 kids, so it makes more sense. We're just outside, just north in Evanston, which is just north. But I have friends that are still in the city, and it's a totally different ballgame right now. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. But I'm not just saying this. If you're ever in Chicago, please put my name down somewhere. Hopefully,
would love that,
and I would love to get together and chat, have a coffee, have a beer, whatever it is.
It would be a pleasure. Thank you. Well, watch the space. Hopefully next year we'll see how things pan out. But it's looking a bit more positive now. So we shall see. But would love that.
It is. All right, man. Well, thanks a lot.
Pleasure.
Have a great day or a great night, I guess.
That's it for today's episode of the 5 Core Life podcast with Will Moore, founder of More Momentum. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have not already, please make sure to subscribe and follow the 5 Core Life podcast wherever you are listening or watching this so that you get notified when new episodes air every week. And if you have not joined the 5 Core Life Facebook group, I encourage you to join that and see what all of the fuss is about. There's some awesome content designed to get your momentum going, including a monthly giveaway to win a complimentary coaching call with the Will Moore. The Facebook group is currently the only place to get Will's dedicated attention on your 5 core journey. If you're feeling stuck or just want someone to cheer you on, then that is the place you need to be. There's nothing like a community of people on the same journey to get you fired up, kicking butt, and taking names. So come join us.
Well, get moving, gain momentum, join the movement. Join Emmett by going to moremomentum.com to take a free life evaluator quiz on where you currently stand in each of your 5 courses.